So I'm going to start sharing my screen. Okay, so I wanted to start this demo session by kind of going through the Steamfitter, Pipefitter, Red Seal exam prep outline. So under description, we have the Steamfitter, Pipefitter, Red Seal examination prep courses designed and based on the competencies listed in the trades Red Seal occupational standard. So short RSOS, and that's what we're going to use to get you your Red Seal designation in this course. So I want to talk a little bit more about that. This is the Red Seal occupational standard for the Red Seal Steamfitter Pipefitter course. And so what is the occupational standard? The Red Seal model has historically been based on the development of National Occupational Analysis, or NOA, that supports the development of multiple choice examinations. A new Red Seal occupational standard, or RSOS, was introduced in 2015 and has taken the place of the NOA. So that's what we're using now. That's what the Red Seal exams are based on, and it is the most effective tool we have to get you your Red Seal designation. So each RSOS or NOA sets the standard for the Red Seal trade. Red Seal examinations are based on this standard, as I mentioned. So preparing for your Red Seal exam, to earn your Red Seal endorsement, you will be tested on the knowledge, skills, and abilities that are outlined in the NOA or RSOS for your trade. Your trade's NOA is your best study guide. The Red Seal exam questions are based on the NOA subtasks, and we're going to look at what exactly are subtasks and how they pull questions from that. The NOA for your trade is organized into the following headings: blocks, tasks, and subtasks. And here are some descriptions of those things, which are blocks. The NOA is divided into major content area called blocks. Tasks. The blocks are then divided into tasks. Each task gives the content to clarify the intent and meaning of the task. It also lists the required knowledge that an individual must acquire to adequately perform the task. Subtasks. The subtasks are the specific functions you perform in relation to a task. Key competencies appear under each subtask that describe the activities you should be able to do to be considered competent in your trade. So this is where we're going to spend most of our time. So in the course that I put together, the emphasis is on the subtasks. So we're going to be looking at the skills that you need to know, and that's where they generate questions on the Red Seal. So remember, your Red Seal exam covers the scope of the trade included in the NOA. So this is the structure of the occupational standard. It contains the following sections. So we're going to be looking at a pie chart, which is, it contains a graph which depicts the national percentages of exam questions assigned to the major work activities. What are major work activities? They are the largest divisions within the standard that is comprised of a distinct set of trade activities. And then task matrix, we're going to look at that, which is a chart which outlines graphically the blocks, tasks, and subtasks of this standard. So going a little bit deeper, this is the pie chart for the Red Seal examination that you are going to be writing. And as you can see, it consists of major work activities A through G. And so today, for this demo session, we're looking at major work activity C: performs rigging, hoisting, lifting, and positioning, which is worth 13% of the Red Seal exam. Now, this pie chart is out of 100, but your Red Seal exam is based out of 130 questions. And I have it here. This is pulled from redseal.ca. So your exam is 130 questions. And if we do some math, we can calculate how many questions we get just from that one slice of this pie. So we have 130 total questions, and that major work activity C is worth 13%, which equates to 17 questions. So that's how this pie chart works. So each percentage consists of so many questions. For major work activity C, we get 17 direct questions out of that major work activity. Okay, so I want to show you basically why we use the RSOS, and how we're going to get you a passing mark. So you need 91 correct answers to get 70%, which is a passing grade. looking at this, we have some low hanging fruit. So we have major work activity A, we're at 12%, major work activity C, which we're going to be discussing today, we're at 13%, and then major work activities F and G, which are worth 6% and 8% respectively. Now, my goal is to get you your Red Seal designation. And so this is how I plan on doing that. First, we're going to start with the low hanging fruit, which, as you can see, are these 4 major work activities, which total equate to 39%. So 130 questions times 39%, that's 51 questions. You need 91 correct answers to get a passing mark. So by focusing on the low hanging fruit, we're already more than halfway there. So hopefully you feel a little bit better about, what you're up against, because what was originally 130 questions is now 80 questions, or 79 rather, since we can pretty much break down these major work activities and master them, and that'll get us more than halfway there. So this is just a breakdown of how many questions those major work activities consist of. A, 16%, F, 7, and G, 11 questions. So this is the course syllabus that I prepared and submitted. As you can see, on a weekly basis, you're going to be given a reading package for the topic of the week, which will be a major work activity. So we're not going to be looking at anything else. We are strictly going to be using the RSOS. And so on a weekly basis, you will receive a reading package and a practice question package. Now, this is an intense course because there's a lot of material to go through. There's going to be probably 10 to 12 modules, 30 to 50 pages per modules that you need to read, and then some practice questions that you should be going through in order to master each of these major work activities. So some of these bigger slices, as you can see, major work activity B, D, and E are a bit larger, and so we'll be spending more time on them. So weeks 2 and 3, we'll spend more time on B, weeks 5 and 6 on D, and 7 and 8 on E. So this is the task matrix I mentioned earlier. So this is the task matrix for major work activity C. And so these are what they call blocks, which, as you can see, task C8, and these are tasks. So this is not what they base the Red Seal question on. On the next page, we're going to be looking at subtasks, which is where we're going to spend most of our time, which is where I've pulled questions out of, and which is where the reading packages are going to be coming from. So we're going to be focusing, because we don't have a lot of time today, we'll be focusing on determines loads, task C 8.01, and task 8.02 prepares lifts and plans. So this is the subtasks. These are the skills that you need to know for this specific subtask, which is determine loads. But we're actually going to be spending more time on knowledge. So they're going to be asking you questions based on this. So as you can see, the learning outcomes demonstrates knowledge of calculations required when performing hoisting and lifting operations, explains how to calculate load weight. So this is going to be a question that they're going to ask you. And I know that because we're looking at the RSOS, we know that questions are based from the subtask, and we're looking at the subtask now, and it's here. And so I know this is something that you need to know in order to successfully get all 13% out of this major work activity C. And there are other things, but this is just what we're going to cover today. So I have an example. So we're going to go into this example. We're going to calculate the weight of pipe. And that is because that is what they want you to know. It's a requirement. Explain how to calculate load weight. This is what they mean. So here we go. We'll do some math. So a safe rule of thumb to use to calculate the weight of steel pipe. 1 foot by 1 foot, 1 inch thick steel weighs approximately 40 pounds. So this is not a formula, it's a statement. So to use this rule of thumb, you must know the area of the pipe to be hoisted and the wall thickness. On pipe 14-inch and up, the wall thickness of standard pipe is 0.375 inches. 0.375 inches is 3/8. And I'll show that to you, 3/8, 0.375. While the wall thickness of extra heavy pipe is 1/2 inch thick, 0.5 decimal inches. And I'll show that to you right out of the IPT. This is a table of imperial pipe dimensions. These go up by increments of 2. And as you can see, this is 16. So the previous one is going to be a 14-inch. And as mentioned, 14-inch and up, the wall thickness of standard pipe is 0.375 inches or 3/8, while the wall thickness of extra heavy pipe is 1/2 inch. So let's double check. This is going to be a 14-inch NPS. Standard is in fact 0.375 extra strong, which is interchangeable with extra heavy. So if you look here, extra heavy pipe is exactly extra strong pipe. Same with double extra heavy. Double extra heavy is exactly double extra strong. They're used interchangeably. So 14 inches, extra strong or extra heavy, has a wall thickness of 0.5. So anything above 14 inches is that pattern is continuing on all the way. So 16-inch standard, 0.375, extra strong, 1/2 inch, and that trend continues. 18-inch standard pipe has a wall thickness of 0.375 or 3/8 thick, or extra strong has a wall thickness of 0.5. Same for 20 and 22 inches, right? Standard 0.375, extra strong or extra heavy, 0.5. 22 inches standard, 0.375, extra strong, 0.5. And I wanted to reiterate that because it's important. That's going to come up. So just keep that in mind. What is the rule of thumb weight to use for a 20-inch extra heavy or extra strong by 20-foot long pipe? So I need to know 2 things to apply this rule of thumb. I need to know the area of the pipe, or the surface area of the pipe to be hoisted, and also the wall thickness. So looking at this example, what is the rule of thumb weight to use for a 20-inch extra heavy by 20-foot long pipe? So they've indirectly have told me that this piece of pipe, which is over 14 inches and is extra heavy, has a wall thickness of 0.5 inches, right? And that's stated there. So it's above 14 inches. It's extra heavy. It's got to have a 1/2 inch wall thickness. So the only other thing we need to calculate now, because we've indirectly have been told the wall thickness is the surface area. So here we have the formula to calculate the surface area of a pipe, which is pi d times length. So we'll take, basically, we know our diameter is going to be 20 inches. Now our length, this is 20 inches and our length is in feet, 20 feet. So we're going to have to do one or the other, because we have to have the same unit of measurements. We cannot cross units of measurements. So in this example, they went for inches. So we'll use that. And I have another example where we're looking to feet. So we'll use their example here. So we need to find the surface area of this piece of pipe, which is going to be pi d, pi times diameter, which is going to be 20 inches. Okay, and now we have, I want to make sure I did that right. Yeah. Pi times 20 inches. Perfect. So we've calculated the circumference. And so we need to calculate the length. We need to factor in the length. So 20 feet equates to 240 inches, and they've done that math. We could have simply went 20 times 12 to get that number, but they've done it for us. So we'll just go ahead and multiply our 20 feet converted into inches to keep our units of measurements the same. And we're going to get 15,080 square inches. And that's the difference between using pi, the button, and using 3.14. So typically when we're doing math as Steamfitter pipefitters, we want to keep a minimum of 4 units of measurement. Here they went ahead and used just 2, 3.14. And so that gave us a difference So here you can see they've calculated their surface area in square inches to be 15,072, where we got 15,079. So it does matter. You want to use the pi button specifically if you're able to, and if not, 4 decimals to a minimum. So our formula is in feet. We need to convert this number into feet. So if there are 12 inches per foot, there are going to be 144 inches per square foot, 12 times 12. So we have 15,080 square inches. We need feet to be able to apply our formula. So what we're going to do here is divide by 144, which is where they got that number from. And we got roughly 104 square feet of surface area for this 20-inch by 20-foot long piece of pipe. So we're about halfway there. So we need to calculate the weight. We found the surface area. And so what we're going to do is we're going to apply our rule of thumb. So multiply the area of the pipe by 40 and divide in half for a 1/2 inch wall thickness. Now there's more than one way to do this. We're going to do it every single type of way. So we'll divide, basically we'll multiply by 40, like they mentioned, and then we'll divide by 2. Okay, and that roughly gets us our answer. So this is an approximation. So this is not an exact number. When you're asked a question using rule of thumb, you want to go and pick the answer that's closest to the answer that you've got. Okay, so looking at these formulas, we're going to do this all over again, applying different formulas. So this first formula here, area in square feet times 40 divided by 1 inch divided by wall thickness. So essentially we have our area, which is 105 square feet. Okay, and we can use 2 methods. We can times by 40 and divide by, and then in brackets, 1 inch divided by wall thickness, which is how they got that 2. So what I would do is go 1 divided by our wall thickness, and it being a 20-inch, which is over 14-inch, and it being extra heavy, I know it's a 1/2 inch, I'll go divided by 0.5 and 2. And that's where they got that 2 from. Okay, now that's the long way. I like to use this formula down here because it's direct. So using our rule of thumb, we can use, basically, we're going to want to solve what's in the bracket to apply our second formula down here, right? So we'll go 40, and then we'll times that by our wall thickness, which we know is 0.5, 20. Okay, so what I would do here, if I wanted to apply this formula below, is to take our area in square feet, which we've calculated to be 105 square feet. And I would multiply it. Already having solved this, we know it's 20. I would multiply by 20. And that gives us our answer. So you can see there's more than one way to get the right answer. I like to get, to my answer as soon as possible. And so this is the formula that I favor, but not everybody likes that way. And so it's totally up to you how you want to go about it. I'm just here to show you the different ways. So we'll use another example. We'll just keep on going. And so remember, we're on block C.8, determining loads. So everything you're being taught is right out of the RSOS. And this is the subtask from major work activity C. So that's what you're being taught today. So we'll use another example, and this time we'll do it in feet, and hopefully you have a better idea on how to solve calculating load weights. So circumference equals diameter times pi. So our first step is always to calculate the circumference, okay? Convert the circumference and length to the same unit of measurement. That's not always going to be the case. Actually, they're more than likely going to give you 2 different units of measurements, and they're going to try to trip you up in that sense. So you're going to want to remember to make sure that your circumference and your length are in the same unit of measurement so that you can apply this formula correctly. So the area is going to equal circumference times length, which we know, and then the weight is going to equal, and we have 2 formulas, both highlighted here. The ones that I just showed you, they're going to be our surface area in square feet times, and then you're going to want to solve what's in the brackets. So you can either go 1 divided by wall thickness or 40 times wall thickness. And remember, 40 comes from our rule of thumb. 1 square foot by 1 inch thick steel weighs approximately 40 pounds. So here's our weight example, 18-inch pipe. So we're looking at an 18-inch pipe and it's got a 3/8 wall, right? And we know 3/8 is 0.375. So this is a standard piece of pipe, isn't it? So it's 20 feet and 9 inches long. We're going to want to keep that into the same unit of measurement. So we've got a mixed here fraction in inches. We're either going to work in fractions or we're either going to work in inches. So it's got a 3/8 inch wall or 0.375 decimal inch, and it equates to 15 pounds. So why don't I show you how they did that? What they've done is they went 40 times 0.375 equals 15, right? So that's how they got that 15 pounds. And there's more than one way to do that. What they could have done is gone 1 inch divided by our wall thickness, 0.75 equals 2.6 continuing 7. Remember, as pipe fitters, we use 4 decimal places. And so what we can do from this point is remember that number, take our rule of thumb, 40, and divide it by 2.667, because we only need the 4 decimals, and that's pretty much 15. So there are 2 different ways to get to 15. The easiest being multiplying 40 with your wall thickness. And so why don't we go ahead and try to calculate this? So we know we have to calculate the circumference first, which is going to be pi times diameter. So we'll go pi times, and our diameter is 1.5 feet, which is 18 inches, if you do the math. So I've already converted this for you. So 4.75, 4.71 feet, excuse me. And then our length, we need to make sure that it's the same unit of measurement. So here we were given 20 feet, 9 inches, and I've converted it to decimal feet, which is 20.75 feet. So we'll multiply, we've calculated our circumference, and now we're going to multiply our length to get our total surface area. Okay, so now we have square foot, we have 97.78 square feet. So we're about halfway there. We need to calculate the weight. And so because they've already given us this 15 pounds, they've solved what's in these brackets for both formulas. And so we could simply multiply by 15 pounds. And I've shown you how to get that 15 pounds. And so we've calculated our pipe to be 1,466 pounds. So now that we know how to calculate load, we'll continue. We'll keep going. So this is, again, right out of the RSOS, and this is task block C8.2. And what we're looking at is the subtask. So everything that you're going to be taught is right out of the subtasks, which is where they derive questions from. So what does this block, task, and subtask consists of? Well, you're going to be learning defines terminologies associated with rigging, hoisting, lifting, and positioning, identifies hazards and describes safe work practices pertaining to rigging, hoisting, lifting, and positioning, identifies codes and regulations pertaining to rigging, hoisting, lifting, and positioning. You're going to be learning identifying types of rigging equipment and accessories and describes their limitations, applications, and procedures for use. Identify types of hoisting, lifting, and positioning equipment and accessories, and describe their applications and procedures for use. Identify types of knots, hitches, and bends, and describes their applications and the procedures used to tie them. Explain sling angle. That's important. It will ask you questions on sling angles. Explain correlations of sling angles to sling capacity. Identify the factors to consider when selecting rigging, hoisting, and lifting equipment. So that is what you're going to be taught next. And we're going to get right into it. I just need a sip of water. One moment, please. Right. So slings. Slings are lengths of wire rope, or fiber webbing with various fittings or loops on their ends. These loops and fittings allow the slings to be wrapped around the load, attached back to the hook, or connected to the load by a piece of rigging hardware with opposite ends going to the lifting hook. Slings require special attention because they often are subject to surf wear and abrasion conditions, and minor changes in sling angles can significantly affect the load. To prevent sharp corners from cutting slings or kinking, provide blocking or protective pads, softeners. So we're going to be learning about all of this stuff. Right now, I just want to get you familiar with the terminology, but we will cover sling angles. We're going to cover kinking, blocking, and softeners, all of which is included in this slide. Do not use the crane to pull the sling from beneath the load. So some safe work practices here. Not good practice to do that. Do not drop the loads on the sling. So again, you don't want to set down whatever it is you're lifting on the sling itself. It's just some more, safe work practices. Avoid sudden stops and starts. Store slings properly. All safe work practices, all things that you should know how to do. So here we're going to cover some softeners. So what are softeners? We have used the term softeners throughout the module. As the name suggests, it is a device used to protect the lifting slings from sharp corners and edges on the load. So at times you can be picking up either beams, pipes, wherever it is that you're lifting. Sometimes you're going to get real close to buildings or structures where that wire, basically the hoist of the crane itself, may come in contact with structures. It never should, but if it does, you're going to want to use blocking and softeners to protect that. And so these are examples of blocking and softeners. So what they've done is they cut a piece of pipe and they put it around the flange of this I-beam right here, right? And so if they're rigging something, you're not damaging your lifting device because it is not up against any sharp corners. As you can see, it's rounded off. And so here's another example. This is your lifting device. Here it looks like some wire rope. They've got a square beam and they're going to go ahead and lift it. But these sharp corners can in fact damage your rigging, possibly snapping it. And there goes your load. And so it's good practice to block it. And so it doesn't come into contact with any corners. So now you know what softeners are. Okay, these are types of synthetic webbing slings. So these are lifting devices. These all need to be stored properly. And the one that you're probably going to use and be asked on is example D, which is a reverse I sling. Okay, this one here. So sling configuration. So now that you know some of the different lifting devices, we're gonna basically learn how to apply them. So sling configurations, there are numerous sling configurations for different types of lifts. Those most often used in rigging are as follows. So this is a vertical hitch. And so the vertical hitch supports the load weight of the load by a single sling at 90 degrees. Therefore, the weight of the load can equal the working load limit of the sling. So this one sling is taking on 100% of the load. So if this is 1,000 pounds, you need a sling that is rated for 1,000 pounds, if not more. You don't want to be too close to what you're lifting in terms of weight. So these are different sling configurations. These sling configurations is called a bridal hitch. And so you can have a 2-leg bridle where they use 2 slings, and they have the 3-leg bridles where they use 3, and continuing, there are also 4-leg bridles, and they're going to use obviously 4 slings with that. So the thing with the bridle hitch is it may consist of 2, 3, or 4 sling hitches used together for hoisting. These slings may have eyes or hooks to connect to the load lifting lugs and attachment. This type of hitch provides excellent load stability. So if you have an uneven load where most of the weight is on one side or the other, you are definitely going to want to use a bridle hitch. This is a 3-leg bridle. The lifting hook be positioned over the center of gravity. So yeah, it's very important that they're going to ask you about this, that you know where the center of gravity is and that you lift from that point for obvious reasons. If you do not, your load will tip. With a 4-leg bridal hitch, frequently only 2 or 3 legs carry the weight, while the other legs only balance the load. So what they're saying here is, unlike the vertical hitch where the complete load was on the one sling, with this configuration, only only some of the slings are carrying the load and the others are used for stability. So if you have 1,000 pounds, the load is 1,000 pounds, you still need slings that are rated for 1,000 pounds, because the load isn't going to be displaced among all 4 slings evenly. In fact, most of the weight is going to be taken by 2 or 3 and 1 sling. The remainder would be only for stability. And so you're going to want to make sure that your rigging is up for the job. These are some more configurations. These are a single basket hitch. With the single basket hitch, the sling is wrapped around the load. Because both ends of the slings are secured to the hook, the sling can only be used for easily balanced loads. So this is stuff that basically has a very easy center of gravity to find, where you don't have to do any intricate rigging. This is where you would apply the single basket hitch. A double basket hitch is a little different. Is made up of 2 single basket hitches. When a sharp corner of the load could damage the slings, a softener is used. And so we know what a softener is. In this case, pieces of pipe slotted so they fit over the beam flange to protect the rope are used. So yeah, in this application here, we see there's a do not use the single basket hitch in this configuration. And the reason is this pipe can easily slip out of this configuration. And so you're going to want to basically use it on the ends here if you're able to. This is another probably way to use it. And they're saying 60 angles or more. So 60 degree is going to be the angle that you want, because it displaces the load evenly among your rigging. And we're going to look at that in just a moment. So this is a double wrap basket hitch. And so they've double wrapped it. They wrapped it around their load twice. This thing is wrapped completely around the load. It can be used in pairs in the same way as a double basket hitch. So it's a good idea to basically, if you have loose pipe, you're going to want to double wrap it for sure. Because the sling makes 360-degree contact, the load is pulled together, providing a very good method for handling loose material, including smooth cylindrical objects such as pipe or shafts, and as shown in figure 14. So it's a self-tightening configuration. As they go up with the crane and lift those loose pieces of pipe, it in fact gets tighter and tighter for increased stability. And so there is no way that this stuff can slip out. So it's a good idea to use that, especially for pipe. Basket hitches have a rating of over 200% compared to sling vertical hitch, but only when all slings are in the vertical position. So when we looked at the vertical hitch, this basket hitch has 200% as a rating of 200% compared to. So it's definitely recommended to use a basket hitch over the vertical hitch. Okay, and that's only if all slings are vertical. Okay, so if you're doing a vertical lift, you're going to want to basket it. Okay, and that's because it's rated 200% more. So it's definitely a good idea to do that than just a straight vertical. Just the increased stability is also important. Sling choker hitch. This is when you basically put a choke on it, and is not suitable for lifting loose bundles. So this is another self-tightening configuration. As you lift the load with the crane, it's going to tighten down, but it's still not recommended that you do that with loose pieces of pipe. You're definitely going to want to use a double wrap, and they're going to ask you about that. We have a couple more before we move on. Double choker hitch. So we looked at the single choker. This is a double choker. And so these just basically tighten as the load lifts. So it chokes it, whatever your load is, it just holds it down. So these hooks should always be turned outwards. So as you can see, there's some hooks. You're going to want to turn them outwards as shown, because the declined sling angle tends to pull the sling to the saddle of the hook, not outward to the tip. Yeah. So double wrap choker hitch. Here's a couple examples. I think you get the point. A double wrap choker hitch and a double choker hitch. They're exactly the same, except this has an additional wrap around. So they've wrapped it around twice as opposed to just once, but it ends with a choke. And so hooks go outwards, and that's because it starts to slip and you can have a decrease in sling angle, which basically puts more weight on your slings. This is a shackle. If you haven't seen one before, the ones that you're going to be working and asked about more than likely is going to be the screw pin anchor shackle. So the two types of shackles most often used in rigging are the anchor, like I just mentioned, bow type, and the chain, D type. Both types are available with 3 different pin styles: screw pin, round pin, and safety type. The most commonly used is the anchor type with the screw pin. That's this guy. Shackle is sized by diameter of the bow section, not the pin diameter. So definitely remember that. So what they're talking about is these are sized according to the diameter of the bow section. This is the bow section. Okay, not the pin diameter. All right, so you're going to want to measure from here to here, which is the bow section. And that's how these are measured. That's important to remember. So please do. There's some rules here. These are some safe work practices when using the shackle. Okay, the general rules for the use of shackles are shown, and you can see here. Just looking at these pictures, the pin is basically where you're going to want to lift from. So if this is my crane, this is the whip line of the crane, and this is my load beneath here, you're going to want to lift from the pin. Of course, it has to be screwed all the way, wrench tight, but you lift from the pin, and the pin is actually rated higher than the bow section of this shackle. Okay, so you're going to want to lift from the pin. That's basically what this is saying up here. So again, do not lift from the bow section. Okay, you lift from the pin. That's going to be a question on your red seal. Spreader bars. So this is another lifting device. Okay, so we're still learning stuff straight out of the RSOS. So nothing you're going to be taught is just completely out of the blue. Everything is out of the RSOS. This is a spreader bar, spreader beam. So this type of device is used to support load which are long, difficult to handle, or subtle to crushing. So if we've got something that if we lift with any sort of configuration, it can basically crush, we use a spreader bar just to give us more working area. So the spreader bar beam can be used to reduce severe sling angle. And the equalizer beam does exactly the same as a spreader bar, but as you can see here, you can either basically pick up the equalizer beam from the center with its rigging down below, or you can use the spreader bar and kind of lift up with one device and from its edges. So that's pretty much the difference there. The equalizer beam are typically used in conjunction with dual hoisting lines. So if you had a massive load, and I'm talking it's so large you need 2 lifting devices, and what they're talking about are cranes, you're going to want to use an equalizer beam. So this is mainly for critical lifts, and we're going to talk about that, probably not today, but in the course, if you register, we're going to talk about everything. So these are some examples of sling angles and what could happen if you don't use the proper sling angles. Okay, so I'm not going to read this, I'm just going to kind of talk about it. So here we have 1,000 pounds on the line. So we got a crane, it's picking up 1,000 pounds. If we have 2 slings and we're picking it up from its corners, we can basically take our load and divide it by 2 because we have 2 vertical, so the configuration is a vertical sling. And so we know we're going to basically divide our load by 2, right? Now that's not the same as you change angles. On a vertical, we know it's going to take on, 100% of the load. And because we have 2 slings, we can divide by 2. But what if we only have 1 sling? Or what if we have 2 slings with different angles? So your best bet is always going to use a sling angle of 60 degrees. Okay, this is the recommended sling angle. And the reason why is because at this angle, it puts the least amount of tension on your rigging. Okay, we have 1,000 pounds. Okay, we're going to be lifting it up. And so here we have 577 pounds per leg. Okay, that is a lot better than 700 pounds per leg on a 45-degree angle, or worse, on a 30-degree angle, 1,000 pounds per leg. So this is excessive sling angle. So if you have a 30-degree sling angle, you're putting the exact load on each one of your slings. So you're gonna basically, that's a bad idea. You're gonna want some heavy duty rigging, or you're gonna want to decrease your sling angle. And this is why the 60 degrees is recommended, because it's the safest way to lift a load at any weight. Okay, and here's another example. Recommended angle for sling legs is 60 degrees. This forms an equilateral triangle where all sides of the triangle are the same length, right? So you can't have a 60 degrees without setting up your rigging equilaterally, right? So that is the recommended, and this is for sure a red seal question. Everything we talk about is red seal related. So now we're going to be looking at, lifting devices. So actual cranes. So this is basically a boom truck. Okay, and you're going to see different types of rigging out there, or lifting devices, I should say, rather. So the boom truck consists of a specialty strengthened truck chassis with a hydraulic boom, usually mounted behind the cab. 2 sets of stabilizers increase the crane stability when hoisting. Okay, they're going to ask you about all of this different stuff. So we have some more cranes here, all of which you need to know. So this is an industrial crane. This is called a flat deck. Now that's not the trade, that's a trade name for it. That's not its formal name. It's called an industrial crane, so we'll go with that. But just for your information, they also have the ability for front and rear wheel steering, so they can move cab-like into awkward positions to make a lift. And so these are relatively small compared to other cranes. And so that's why it's called a flat deck. You can get them into really tight areas. These are very handy. You're going to want to know more about this because you're going to ask you about that. This is a rough terrain crane. The rough terrain crane, sometimes known as a cherry picker, has oversized tires and is designed for rough ground. So you can't take this flat deck, this industrial crane here, and go out into the bushes and start lifting pipe. That's not the right application for this crane. If you're out there in the middle of nowhere, you're going to need a rough terrain crane. So that could be a question that they ask you. This is where the job is. This is what you're lifting. What sort of crane do you want to use? And obviously, for out in the wilderness, when you're out there, you're going to want to use a rough terrain crane. And so that's why we have so many different various cranes, is because one, there's no all for one crane. Each one serves a purpose and has a very specific application, and that is why you need to know all the different types of cranes and how to use them properly. So this is a carrier mounted lattice boom crane. Now these are heavy duty, and so we'll learn a little bit about it. We have some more information here. I'm just going to read the highlights. But the carrier mounted lattice boom crane is different from hydraulic telescoping booms of the previous cranes in that the boom length is fixed. So this is the boom, and it does not scope in and scope out like the other cranes we've been talking about. It's fixed. So you get what you get. And so you're going to have to look at a load chart and see how heavy of a load you can pick up with the radius that this carrier mounted lattice boom provides. So again, stuff we're going to be looking at later. We're very limited time. We don't have a whole lot. So we'll just keep going until we have to stop. carrier mounted telescopic boom crane. So this is very similar to the crane we just spoke about, although this one does in fact have a telescopic boom, meaning it retracts. And so you can basically put it out as much as you need to. For heavier loads, you're going to want less boom. For lighter loads, you're definitely going to be able to scope out fully and have a wider swing radius. This is a crawler mounted latest boom crane. Now this is for heavy duty lifted. This is in fact fixed. So this does not retract. The boom is fixed, but this is definitely heavy duty. So that they call it a crawler because it moves very slow. The tracks can be extended laterally to provide a wider stance, which gives the crane more stability. Blocking. So this is an example of blocking. So for most booms, they're gonna scope out, and this is using the legs here, the riggers. And so if you have uneven ground, you're not gonna be able to simply, set this up anywhere. You're gonna need to block it. Your crane is only as good as its base. So you wanna make sure you have a very, very good base before you go ahead and pick up anything, because these things are so heavy, they're prone to tipping. So that's where blocking comes in. And it should be a minimum of 3 times the float area. So this is a quadrant of operation. So the crane sweep area is the total area that the crane's boom can swing over. This sweep area is divided into working areas called quadrants. So just looking at these, depictions here, over the rear, over the side, over the front, and over the other side. So the swing radius is going to be within the quadrant. And that's for every single crane that we've looked at, right? This is basically the crawler that we just saw. And yeah, it's got its own little quadrant, and it's not able to lift outside of that quadrant. And we're going to have to look at a load chart to figure out how heavy of a load we can carry at what distance. These are factors that reduce the rated capacity of the crane. So basically there's some electrical hazards, overhead power lines. So now we're looking at the limitations of these devices. So this is the last thing I'm going to cover because it is 4 p.m. and that is the end. But looking at the absolute limits of approach, there's a chart here that you will be asked about. There is no question this is included in your Red Seal exam, just like everything else that we covered, but emphasis on this. We're looking at the limitations of the cranes. So there's an absolute limit of approach. So that you could only get so close to power lines before you're in trouble, basically. And so looking at this chart, we have the normal operating near high voltage power lines. If you're able to read this chart, you're going to be able to answer any questions. And all that's saying is, if you're near a power line that has 200 to 350 kilovolts, you're going to want to stay a minimum of 20 feet away. Or if you're, by a high powered power line, 750 to 1,000 kilovolts, a minimum of 40 feet. And the reason why is because that voltage can actually jump across the power line and energize the crane that you're using, and now you're in an unsafe condition. So get to know this chart because you will be asked about it. That concludes the demo session for today. Thank you, Rita, for listening and for being here.
No worries. Yeah, thank you
I'm
so
going to
much for
stop
that.
sharing my screen now. Yeah.
All right. Thanks so much
So
for
hopefully
that.
you enjoyed that. Yeah.
Yeah, it was actually pretty cool. I thought it was gonna be too technical, but even the math was actually like, oh wow, I didn't realize that you guys have that much math to deal with. Yeah, and I really like how you did it at the start, wherein you kind of I'm so glad that you showed that pie chart and that like these are the low hanging fruit, and if we get all of these, like at least 50% of it, then you have like 90-ish questions that are like maybe not an expert on, but at least
Yeah.
it sets you on the right track. So that is actually the content that we're looking for. What I'm thinking is I'll probably ask my coworkers or my teammates to like make clips, if that makes sense. It's kind of like just maybe like a 30-second clip or like 5-minute clip of just that part, and then we can actually we can make it as a teaser for this entire demo class. So thank you
Yeah,
so much
yeah.
for that.
No,
Yeah.
you know what? I really wanted to include that
Mhm.
because I think that had a lot to do with me being hired, if I'm being honest, because I made it very obvious that I'm not out to produce the greatest pipe fitters.
Mhm.
My aim is to get my students their red seal designation. And so strategically, that would be the way to go about it, right? So if I can get them more than halfway there without them, overextending themselves, I feel pretty good about, even finding and isolating other low-hanging fruit in those other major parts. So yeah, I feel, pretty confident that I can get my students pretty close to a passing mark, but that involves them absolutely putting in the work because, what we covered today, it was a very,
Yes.
very tiny portion of the entire
Yeah.
trade.
Mhm.
And so it's a lot. It comes at you really fast. It's very technical in some aspects. I mean, those major work activities, I believe B and D, very,
Mhm.
very technical. And that's where most people have the problems, but those are not stuff we're going to be focusing on. We're going to be looking at the very, easy, low hanging fruit. And, hopefully that gets them over the top, but they have to be willing to do the work.
Oh
So
yeah. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, this is actually that's really golden. Like it I mean, that's the purpose of why we have the Red Seal exam prep. It's like it's to prepare them for the exam for better success rate, and that is the strategy that we're definitely looking for. So, thank you
yeah,
so much for that. Yeah.
you're very welcome.